Hey Ding Dongs, I'm Jamie.
I'm Richard.
And this is Explain It to Jamie, the political comedy podcast in which I, Jamie, a politically innocent but curious young man, have the complicated political happenings of the world explained to me by my very smart and lovely friend Richard Land.
Soon to be replaced by a Google network named R.L.M. or some shit like that.
Someday,
Yeah.
if only my creation would wake up. That time is coming sooner than we think.
Yep, I'm going to be a Frankenstein robot. And then we won't need podcasts at all. We'll just have it all downloaded to us or whatever.
That's right. We can all be like in the Wall-E universe, just riding around on our electric scooters,
Just fat as hell.
Yeah, just
with TV one inch in front of your face.
Oh God,
The dream.
yeah. If only I could live to see that. That's why, Richard. That's why we have to advance our technology, is so that you and I
Can get fat and just finally watch all of the Star Trek Deep Space Nine we want.
That's exactly right. That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
So, Jamie, what is
Yes.
it you want to have explained to you this week?
I want to have explained to me this Chechen homophobic crisis that's happening.
Okay.
The gay people in Chechnya, or at the very least, the people perceived as being gay in Chechnya, are being rounded up and harassed violently in many excruciatingly horrible ways. And I want to know
What the deal is.
what the deal is, guys.
Yeah. All right. This is it's a very weird vibe between Chechnya and Russia, and there's a lot of stuff to chat about. So, why don't we keep this short and sweet and just let's take a slice out of this knowledge pie.
Wow. Someone is on today.
Hey!
Wahoo! All right,
Okay.
Here we are. Okay, so Chechen homophobia.
Yes.
Richard.
So, Jamie, what do you know about Chechnya?
What do I know about Chechnya? Well,
That's like I love that reaction. It's like, so what do you know about this? You're like, just instantly dismissive. Of
yeah, I don't know. They're like, they're they supply all the minions for James Bond villains, don't they?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Like just sort
Yeah.
of the generically Eastern European sounding, hard, manly men.
Yo, it's so funny that you say that though, because this is a thing that I've noticed as I've gotten older, is like how you can trace the like geopolitics of the world based on like who's the bad guy in a Hollywood action movie.
Yeah,
and
totally.
we came of age in a like Chechnyan era.
Yeah.
Like the James Bond Golden Eyes and kind of shit like that of the world.
If it wasn't like specifically Russia,
Yeah.
like making a hard move on the world, it was like a country that had fallen off of Russia.
Yeah.
And was in turmoil.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that was like our bad guys.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Kids are growing up now with a lot of Arab bad guys. I've been noticing.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, and North Korean.
And
Have you
North
noticed
Korean.
there was a brief little resurgence of North Koreans, but I think we're probably going to start seeing more Islamic bad guys. Which, funny story.
Yes.
Well, funny is not actually the word that this is,
Right,
but just
not
like
funny, ha ha. Funny like boo hoo.
yeah, that's right. Like how people use that word funny to mean horribly depressing. So let's segue back into talking about Chechnya.
Right.
It's come out since about the beginning of April that in Chechnya, the confirmed number that I've heard is 100 or so. I've heard higher than that also, up to several hundred. Gay men have been sort of abducted off the street or have disappeared and have been taken to kind of like a secret prison where that's like an off-the-grid prison where they've been beaten, harassed, threatened, intimidated. At least a few of them have been killed. And then often they are released back to their families and kind of outed as being gay.
Right.
And the reason that this all takes place within kind of a much... So that's kind of like what's been happening. There's this like kind of order given by somebody to suddenly make a move, and all of these kind of people who were gay in Chechnya disappeared. Now, there's very, very, very few people in Chechnya who are openly gay. There are also very few people in Russia who are openly gay. Now, Chechnya, let's let's just crank this all the way back. So Russia is a federation like Canada. So what that means is that Russia is a single country that's composed of like a bunch of regions that all have their own forms of government, right? And Russia, as we've talked about many times when we've talked about Russia on this podcast, is a historically fractured nation that only in kind of recent history has been a single big entity, right?
It's kind of defined by its like I don't want to say its warlike nature, but it was kind of built out of
conquest.
Conquest.
Yeah, that's right.
Tribes,
it was
right?
an old empire, right? And it has kind of declined in size since the Soviet Union broke up, but it's still, the country Russia is still like what were historically a lot of different countries that have been amalgamated into one. Now, one of the most famous, probably the most famous, like after Siberia, like the most famous single area of Russia is probably Chechnya. It has a lot of like international prominence, and it's been in the news many, many times over the last several decades because it tried forcibly to separate after the Soviet Union collapsed. Now, Chechnya is in like the western southern part of Russia. So it's like, it almost borders Eastern Europe. Like it's very closely interrelated to Eastern Europe ethnically. It's part of the region that's called the Caucasus, which are where Caucasians come from. The Caucasus is like it's where a lot of the oil is in Russia, so it's an oil state, Chechnya. It's mountainous. It has about 1 million people, 1.2 million people, so it's pretty small.
Oh wow!
But the people there are generally
hardened killing machines.
Well, they've been basically an oil-rich state that's sandwiched between Europe and Russia. So, like, they have seen their share of shit over the years.
Right.
You know, for hundreds of years, the Caucasus has been a conflict zone, essentially, between various powers who are grappling for influence. And the Chechnyan people are a pretty codified and hardened group of people. Like, they are a very distinct ethnic group inside their own state, right? In World War II, Chechnyans kind of like split against the Soviet Union. So like a bunch of them fought for independence, used World War II as an excuse to fight for independence, and fought against Russia. This is kind of a recurring theme throughout Chechnyan history under Russian rule. And Stalin was so pissed about that, he actually kicked them all out, literally all of them. He kicked all the Chechnyans out of Chechnya and sent them all to live in Kazakhstan from like 1945 until 1957. Wow. So like for like decades. No, it might have even been longer than that. It might have been that he kicked them out in 57. No. Oh, I'll double dip this. Basically, it wasn't until Khrushchev took over and Stalin was dead that the Chechens were allowed to come back. And a lot of the Chechens who are like the old guard Chechens now, the people who are kind of like of our parents' generation, were born in Kazakhstan and like grew up in exile.
It's interesting because I think it's interesting because I think of, and I'm going to show my ignorance here, but when I think of it, up until these recent reports of the abductions and imprisonment, I wouldn't have been able to tell you really the difference between like Kazakhstan and Chechnya and Turkmenistan, or what's the one where they play the game with the goat heads? Or where they take a dead goat and they throw it into a well.
I think that's where the Dothraki come from.
Yeah. Well, like, the Dothraki also, for me, kind of fit into that group.
Yeah, they exist somewhere.
Like, I'm like, yeah, they exist somewhere in and around there.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
This is like kind of Central Asian mishmash. Like it all kind of blurs together.
And I'm sure that there's a huge difference. If I said this to a Chechnyan person, they would be like,
well, it's like for them, what's the difference between an Albertan, a British Columbian, a Saskatchewanian, someone from North Dakota? Like to them, that would make no sense. But to us, there are differences between those people, right?
Right. One of them is good.
Guess which one?
Yeah, tweet in.
Yeah,
you can tell us which.
We'll do a survey. So the Chechens are used to being in conflict with Russia as a whole, and they're used to being, kind of like persecuted and shit on, and having to fight for their own survival and independence. They're also a Muslim state. Like they're a Muslim. Islam is their religion, and Anyway, fast forward. After they were allowed to come back to Chechnya and live there again, once the Soviet Union collapsed, they fought again for independence from Boris Yeltsin and the new Russian Federation. So this was the first Chechnyan War, which was, I think, in 92 to 96 or so. Yeltsin thought he was going to waltz in there and crush them. It turned out that was not the case. It's a super mountainous region. They're used to doing kind of like insurgent wars. So it was this like grotesquely horrible meat grinder for the Russian army, just like tons of troops dying, Russian troops, disproportionately to Chechen troops. In the end, they just call a ceasefire, and basically they're like, okay, look, we're not going to give you independence really, but we're going to not try to invade you anymore and more or less let you do your own thing. So there's this kind of like gray area period for a couple years.
Right.
Then, when Boris Yeltsin steps down in 1999 and Vladimir Putin takes over, right before Vladimir Putin first goes into his first election, he starts the Second Chechen War. And this is like, there's a lot of propaganda, there's a lot of conspiracy theories about him kind of like,
starting this war for reason?
He definitely started the war to increase his own popularity and basically make people rally behind him so that they would vote for him.
Okay.
What the conspiracy theories come in is there's a lot of theorizing that he orchestrated a series of terrorist attacks on Russia to make it look like Chechens were attacking things and use that as the justification to enter the war. There were like a bunch of crazy terrorist attacks in 1999 in Russia that were blamed on Chechens, but then there were also things like one of the Russian parliamentarians stood in the Duma and gave a speech condemning terrorist attacks on certain cities, and he named a city that actually hadn't had a terrorist attack, but then like 2 days later that city did have a terrorist attack, though he had, the conspiracy theory is like he had seen a list of the cities and fucked it up, the order. Right. And then also at one point during this time, a bunch of Russian like FSB agents were caught in the basement of a Russian building with all these explosives, and they were like, "We're doing an exercise. Get out!" Like, mom, get out of my room! Yeah, what did you know? It was like that, except with fake terrorist attacks, right, probably.
Yeah, I'm just masturbating. Yeah, these aren't bombs.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, here's. I mean, I don't know. I don't know enough to really compare them, but would this be sort of akin to when September 11th happened and people were like, the government, it was an inside job because the government wanted to invade the Middle East.
Yes.
I mean, in theme,
like
but
it's
probably
the same
not
kind
in
of
fact.
conspiracy theory. I think this one, like, there's, Russia is a information closed state. It's hard to get real information there, and there's a lot of misinformation and outright lying from the government. So it will be hard to know if this is the truth or not. Regardless, to say, Putin got the justification. He needed to go into the Second Chechen War and expected it to be a stomp. Like he was like, he wanted to rally the Russian people behind a cause. Remember, it was really fractured. Their new economic system wasn't working very well. It was breaking down. They all wanted some kind of stability. And so he used this to basically popularize himself and rally everyone behind the flag, right? He succeeded. He got elected in a landslide, but then the war became a disaster, right? Just like under Yeltsin, like they could not subdue people. Like even though they marched into the capital of Chechnya and took it over, which is called Grozny, which I read is the Russian word for terrible. Like just in case you forgot, this was like an imperial holding.
Terrible.
Yeah.
Oh, that is brutal.
Yeah. Anyway,
Grozny. Now, I do have to say that's like scraping the bottom of my list of places I'd like to go in the world.
Well, actually, apparently it's pretty cool. It's like nice now. I mean, I wouldn't want a vacation there either, but we'll talk about this. Yeah. Anyway, really just like in many insurgent style wars, they march in, they take over the main city, but then all the people run to the mountains and fight back, right?
Right.
And so over the next several years, there's all kinds of wild terrorist attacks. Remember, we mentioned the hostage taking in the Russian theater in 2002, where like 700 to 900 people were taken hostage. Chechnyans did that, yeah. Chechen militants did that. Right. And that was kind of their tactic, is like as they fought a kind of insurgent war in Chechnya, they also went into Russia and orchestrated terrorist attacks to try to take away popular support for the war, which did succeed. Right. The war ground on the Russians horribly bungled the hostage situation in the theater. They ended up accidentally killing several hundred of the hostages because they flooded the theater with gas that was supposed to knock everybody out and misjudged the dosage or something.
Whoops.
Whoops. Anyway, after several years, the war's ground on and on and on, and Putin wants an out. He started this war, but he needs a way out of it. So what he does is he makes an alliance with some of the people who they had formerly fought for independence. So this guy, the guy he goes to is this guy named Ahmad Kadyrov. Ahmad Kadyrov was like oh my God, what is the term? He was like the main spiritual leader of Chechnya's kind of church. Okay. Like he was like the head.
Like the Pope of the church.
Yeah, but it wasn't he was just like the head Islamic theologian in Chechnya. Right. And in the first war, he had fought for Chechen independence. But in the second war, he had become more in favor of of allying with Russia and staying in a relationship with Russia, because even though Chechnya itself believes in a pretty orthodox form of Islam, they had started to see the influence of Wahhabism or Salafism, which is like the radical Islam that is practiced by ISIS in Saudi Arabia. And that freaked them out. So they were more and more seeing hardline Islamic groups and thinking, you know what, this is not what we believe in either. In order to suppress Wahhabism, we need to keep allied with Russia. Right. So Putin and Ahmad Kadyrov make a deal. Putin's going to call off the war and essentially make Kadyrov the president. Now there are, and Chechnya gets this very, very special relationship that no other territory in Russia gets to have, where they're basically their own country and they get a shitload of money from Russia. So they get to have their own elections, administer their own laws. They have their own army, which nowhere else in Russia gets to have. And they also get 85% of their budget every year as money from Russia, like straight up money.
Whoa.
So they get billions of dollars a year from Russia.
And so sorry, what does Russia get out of it?
They get a graceful exit from the horrible war that they were in, and they get oil. Right.
And, so, and old Putin knows a thing or two about oil.
That's right.
And what to do with it.
That's exactly correct.
Right.
So that's the deal that Ahmad Kadyrov makes. They take it. Ahmad Kadyrov is elected the president in 2004, and then after about 10 months, he's killed. He's assassinated. While he's watching a parade in a stadium, he gets exploded by a bomb. And because the militant,
I find the term "he gets exploded"
right. There is like something kind of absurdist about it, right? Yeah. He gets blown up, and he dies.
Right, he's exploded.
And in the immediate wake of that, Putin goes to his son, Ramzan Kadyrov. Now, Ramzan Kadyrov at this time is 27 years old, and he has showed very little interest in anything other than punching stuff real hard and driving around looking cool. He is.
When you know what you like, you know what you like.
Yeah, right. I mean, like he was the head of his father's personal guard at the time, and he's like a boxing enthusiast and just like very macho dude.
I think he's the guy we've talked about before, right?
That's right.
Like,
he's the guy.
I've seen him. I forget what it was. I was watching an interview with him, Vladimir Putin, and something, and it was like, a nothing interview. It was like, why are we great? Well, we're great because of this and this also. And they're like, cool.
Yeah.
But I remember seeing him and thinking he was so out of place sitting next to Vladimir Putin.
It seems odd, right?
Well, Vladimir Putin's this like very, this well dressed, icy, cold guy. And like looks like a Bond villain. I'm pretty it's hard to. I guess that's chicken or the egg, right? Like, does the Bond villain look like Vladimir Putin?
Or does right? Like if you're a designer and you're like, I need to design a Bond villain. Like, what's your first Google image search? It's probably going to be, it could easily be Vladimir Putin.
Yeah. But then
or Ramzan Kadyrov. They're like two different Bond villains.
Both great ideas for Bond.
Yeah.
But then this Ramzan Kadyrov.
Yeah, that's right.
Is he's sitting next to him and he's in like military fatigues and like shit kicking boots and has like a low hat so you can't really see his eyes and this beard, and he's clearly a dude that works out constantly.
Yeah.
He looks like a dangerous man.
Yeah. I mean, many people have and will continue to call him kind of like a thug. Like he was just kind of like a violent guy who had found a way to legitimize and express his violence as the head of his father's personal guard.
Yeah.
Putin goes to him after his father's killed and basically says like, you're the next. I'm going to make you the next in line. Like they have a sit down together. And apparently they really get along, which is odd, because Putin and his dad kind of had an alliance of convenience, but they weren't like super warm on each other.
Right.
But Ramzan Kadyrov and Vladimir Putin like each other in a way that is different. And it's really interesting. I went back and read some of the obituaries of Ahmad Kadyrov, and all of them, like in the Western media, and they're all really pessimistic. One of them literally is like, who knows how long Ramzan Kadyrov is going to last before he gets murdered? Probably not till the next election. And it's also interesting to note, he couldn't even legally become the president of Chechnya when he was 27 because you have to be 30. Oh. So he had to wait 3 years of fake not being the president, even though Putin basically had told him, you're the guy. He gets elected in a landslide the first time that he faced his election, and he's been the president ever since. So that was in 2007. He finally formally took over the presidency when he turned 30, and he's been the president for 10 years.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't know nearly enough to speculate on the relationship between Ramzan Kadyrov and Vladimir Putin. Mm-hmm. But I imagine, especially if the relationship with his father was a bit more contentious, like with Vladimir Putin between his father, not contentious, but
it wasn't
more. You have to maintain it.
Yeah, they were in an alliance, but
I could understand how, as a 27-year-old, you don't even want to run the country, but the guy who's in charge of that decision comes to you. He's also happens to be the most powerful man and dangerous man in the world.
Yeah,
comes to you and says, "You're in charge of this country now. You run it how you want, but these are the rules. We will give you 85% of your budget. Don't worry about an economic crisis.
Yeah,
and all you have to do is stay tough and do as you're told."
And that's exactly the thing, is that Putin and Kadyrov have this incredible. It's a great situation for both of them because Putin gets to basically point now to a prosperous Chechnya that's a functional part of the Russian Federation and say, see, we solved the Chechnya thing. And Kadyrov is unquestionably loyal to Putin. He knows where his dinner's coming from. But then he also gets to run his whole country exactly in the manner that he wants to. There's two stories for sure about Chechnya. There's the Kadyrov side, when you look at it from his side, and then there's the larger, okay, let's actually look at what's going on here view. Kadyrov, again, similar to Putin, gave stability to a region that was deeply traumatized from decades of armed conflict and instability, right? Many Chechnyans adore him and talk about how he has given back. He's the soul of the Chechnyan people now, and they feel concretely that he has finally given them back their nation, back their homes, and back their country. He is a unabashedly proud Chechnyan, proud Muslim person who is a kind of interesting micromanager. So Kadyrov is super on Instagram. That dude is online as hell.
Oh, yeah?
What's
his Insta?
Kadyrov_95.
Not really.
No, that's it. That's his fucking Instagram.
Really?
You can look at it right now, man. He's all over Instagram. He's on Instagram every day. Chechnyan people DM him on Instagram when they have problems with shit, and sometimes he will show up personally and help deal with them.
Well, let's be straight though. There's only 1 million people in
that's right. It's a small country, but that's what I mean is he is a dude who's really personable,
right,
and really kind of extroverted like that. And loves to be the guy. He loves to show up and personally deal with shit.
Actually,
you know what I mean?
If you think about it like that, it's the amount of people per him.
Yeah,
that's the same as the mayor of Edmonton just being that hands-on.
Kadyrov 95, Ramzan Kadyrov, blue check mark.
My God.
Right? So, he clearly now has a bit of a industrial complex behind it. So there's very professionally made videos like this one. Here, let's just play this.
What I love about
you could hear
is at some point. Yeah.
So this is an MMA pump up video, and it looks like a news organization.
Is that him?
Made it. No, that's not him. I don't know what this says. It's all in Cyrillic. No, it's. I think it's a propaganda piece about a Russian MMA fighter right now.
Sweet.
But then there's also shit
radio. You know what I love is that at some point Twitter had to make the decision to send him a verified.
Sorry.
Okay,
I keep clicking. Yeah, sorry. Say that again.
You know what I love is that at some point Twitter had to send him a verification email to be like, "Hey, is this you?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "It is me."
Click yes.
Congratulations.
No,
There's
like,
your blue check mark.
Yeah, and then there's also stuff like, this is his kid. Like, he clearly actually shot that.
Yeah.
I don't know what his kid's yelling. I'm sure it's something horrible. Yeah. Anyway, so he's super on Instagram.
I love my city of terrible.
That's
that's what he's saying.
That's right. Yeah. So he's super on Instagram. His people love him because he's really responsive and he intervenes in their daily lives. Now, also sometimes people will send him complaints about stuff, and those people are like
disappeared.
They are occasionally disappeared. They're humiliated. God. There's also like public TV humiliations are a thing in Chechnya. So a woman who was, I think she was a social worker, like a teacher, wrote this big Facebook post, just kind of railing about some of the problems with Kadyrov, and he like made her come on TV with him and apologize to his face on national TV. Wow. And clearly she did not do it out of the goodness of her heart, and there was like some dude off camera with a Kalashnikov pointed at her head or something that kind of thing happens a lot. But
I mean, people get publicly shamed in North America as well. Just usually they volunteer for it via reality shows.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
When Kadyrov has his own version of The Apprentice that's on TV right now, where people are competing to be his assistant. It's new, and apparently, it's popular. All these people from all over Russia are competing to be Kadyrov's assistant, and they do military.
Can you imagine if Justin Trudeau held everybody would be like,
"Yeah,
sure, this is my shot."
Yeah.
I'm not qualified for that at all, but no, by God,
yeah. So he's a huge public figure. And Chechnya is a Muslim state that is more or less governed by Sharia law is not exactly correct. It's still, I think, beholden in some ways to Russian law. It is allowed to make its own laws, but here's an example that kind of helped me paint a picture of what it's like there. So, Sharia law. Here's an example too of the difference between Wahhabism and Sharia law, because you hear these. It's confusing what these things are. So in Sharia law, a woman has to have her head covered, whereas in Wahhabism and ISIS, it's you have to wear the full burqa, right? So as you see around Toronto, if you just have to have your head covered, there's all kinds of ways of personal expression and fashion and stuff that goes along with that. So it's kind of a less. It's restrictive. Yeah, it's less restrictive in its way, although there is still an element of misogyny to that, right?
Sure.
In Chechnya, there was a thing a few years ago where men were driving around in pickup trucks shooting paintballs at women who had their heads uncovered. And Kadyrov was I wanted to high five all those guys and go riding around with them. That was his quote about it. Right. So it's not you'll get arrested if you're a woman with your head uncovered, right? It's not the law, but society will not save you from harm.
Has permission.
Yeah, there's tacit, exactly. So it's that's kind of the dynamic, right? It's not it's illegal. I'm doing finger quotes, but society will punish you, and there's no recourse against that because the president will go on TV and be yeah, you should have had a paintball shot at you, right? That's kind of the thing about it,
right? I mean, I guess it is. You could make the argument it is a universal rite of passage for every young man to drive around in a pickup truck and shoot paintballs at women
who don't have their heads covered. Yeah, I guess you could argue that.
Yeah, we all did it.
Yeah,
we all did.
Who can forget the classic American ritual of shaming women into not properly obeying Sharia law?
This is a game that it's a horrible teenager's game, but I never played it, and I actually don't know anyone that's ever played it. It was sort of one of those theoretical have you ever played Spoons?
Have you ever played Monopoly?
Yeah, exactly.
This fake game no one's ever heard of? No, okay, but go on.
In high school, there was this game called Spoons that was talked of. In which you drove to a bad part of town and you threw spoons out your window at prostitutes, and if you missed, you had to go pick it up. That's the end of the story.
Right.
It's it's born in the same crucible of misogyny that exactly. Most teenage misogyny is born in.
Yeah, but in Chechnya, Justin Trudeau would get on TV and be like,
"Yeah,
I wish I was riding around with those kooky guys. Man, what a good time that must have been."
Exactly.
Yeah, so you can see how that's. And already you're seeing these, there's dynamics of social pressure and of people kind of upholding the norms of Islamic society, right? Chechen society is also clan based. Like there's these family clans that the society is kind of organized into that have always been kind of like units, and they've kind of been like an oligarchy for a long time. Now the Kadyrovs are like way ahead of everybody else. They've been elevated to like the highest prominence by Putin, but there are still like other warlords, other clans. It's a family-based society, right? And because it's a family-based society, it also has things like honor killings, right? So like if a woman has sex outside of marriage, sometimes her family murders her to like, because their family's honor has been impinged. And this is also done if people are gay, right? Because Sharia law does not allow people to be gay. It's like forbidden. And Ramzan Kadyrov's really chilling response, like looping back all the way around to our original topic about this like gay genocide thing, is that he's like, no, we're not arresting gay people because there are no gay people in Chechnya. And if there were any, their families would all have sent them to where they could not return, which is like killed them. Right. And he's not being abstract. Like he's like that. There is a pretty good chance that would happen, and indeed does happen in Chechnya. So Chechnyans they like him, and they acknowledge that they don't live in a free society. They don't live in a society where you can always criticize him, and there is like intimidation and scariness. But like Grozny was destroyed in the Second Chechen War. It was like nothing. It was obliterated, and now it's modern. Right. It's rebuilt. It's beautiful. There's normal life there. Granted, it's like life under Sharia law and life that's not in a free society, but it is normal. Now, at the same time, as that, Kadyrov's been on Instagram and acting like a tough guy, he is absolutely murdered all of his major political opponents. Most of the journalists who have ever dared to criticize him, like the most famous one is this woman who I think, it's Russian name. I'm not that great with them, but I think her name was Anna Politskaya, something like that. Right. Writing for this paper in Novaya Gazeta, which is like the main opposition paper in Russia. She did one of the first ever interviews with Kadyrov after he became president. She sat down with him, and they hated each other. They did not get along. He ended up yelling at her and shit during the interview because of how she was questioning him, and she said like all of these quotes about what a cold idiot he was and how she didn't like it. He was a brute and a thug and all this stuff, and she was murdered, and she was murdered a couple years later. And like since then, other people who have fled Chechnya, journalists who have fled Chechnya under intimidation, have said like this. Somebody came to me and was like, "What happened to Anna Politskaya could happen to you." So Chechnyans have been connected to lots of murders of opposition politicians and journalists and things like that, and always this comes back to Kadyrov.
How do things like that get digested by the public in Chechnya? Like I feel like if a reporter in Canada was murdered shortly after, like aggressively going after the prime minister, there'd be an outcry and a lot of
right. So this isn't a free society, right? So if you were a journalist in Chechnya who breaks the story that this person was murdered for criticizing Kadyrov and accuse Kadyrov of being complicit in that, you would either someone would show up at your house and threaten your entire family or your whole family, or threaten your family. And remember, it's a clan society, right? So families are big, and they're also like super public. Like everyone knows who's connected to who, right? So it's very easy to threaten people's family. And indeed, sometimes like if a journalist goes into hiding, sometimes their family just gets killed. Like several dozen other family members will just be murdered, right? So they'll either tell you, and then they'll make you come, either you flee, you get killed, or your family gets threatened, or they make you come on and say you were lying about everything. You go on TV and you say, I actually, I made it all up. I'm sorry, Mr. Kadyrov. Yeah. That happens too. Right? The journalist actually writing for the same paper as this woman, Novaya Gazeta, who originally broke the story about the Chechen men getting rounded up, is in hiding right now, fearing sort of reprisal, because she has been threatened, right?
I can't imagine why.
Yeah, right. Interestingly enough, too, there's a strong, there's like very clear links to the Russian opposition leader was assassinated in 2016, and right outside the Russian parliament, and it was theorized that Chechens did this too. He had been critical of Chechnya and Putin's role in propping up the Kadyrov regime. And apparently Putin was furious about this. And this was the first kind of misstep between Kadyrov and Putin, which led to kind of a chilliness in their relationship. You know, Putin was furious that they would murder a Russian politician right outside the parliament building, the Duma. And Kadyrov, similar to when Putin made Angela Merkel really angry and was actually worried that he had overstepped, apparently Kadyrov similarly was worried he'd overstepped. Putin didn't take his calls for a while and stuff like that. And, you know, if Putin decides to get rid of Kadyrov, it won't be pretty, but he could for sure do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyway, that's the situation that we find ourselves in today. That's why this is what precipitated the roundup of gay men in Chechnya was, and I haven't heard anything about any groups that aren't just gay men. I've only heard it as gay men.
I guess, that's my
for
question.
Whatever reason
like,
that is.
Why now? Like, what has happened?
So what precipitated it was an LGBTQ rights group in Russia applied for the rights to do pride parade marches in a bunch of cities throughout Russia. Now, the LGBTQ communities are most active in Moscow and St. Petersburg, which are the two major cities, and generally not nearly as active throughout the kind of smaller areas, but they applied.
I think that's probably universal.
Yeah.
You know, it seems to me pride parades are only, not only, but are biggest in
big cities.
Groups of people.
Right. Yeah. And so they applied for all these, to do marches in all these other cities. Now, they didn't actually even apply for one in Grozny, but kind of in response to this and to the larger, gay rights in Russia are very far behind where they are in the West, and gay people are still very much on the margins of society, and they face a lot more outward violence and hostility and threats to their own lives than they do in the West, where they still do face those things.
Yeah.
But in Russia, it's like the vast majority of society would not help you.
Right. It's like jumping 30 years in the past.
Exactly.
Even further.
Exactly. So they're still kind of in the early stages of that. So this was kind of a big push from them to increase their profile and, normalize the gay rights movement in Russia. And it seems in response to that, the Chechnya made this move to eliminate gay people. Now, obviously, they had been gathering information on gay people and stuff like that for quite a while. There's kind of rumors that they've done it through sting operations, like by finding people on the internet in gay meetups, and then the gay person shows up and it's like the army, right? And also that there was,
and then they go through their phones.
Yeah, that's right.
I've heard that, so they'll they'll track down one gay guy, confirm him as gay, then go through the phone and
find other people
and invite them to the same place.
I'd also heard that they were getting realtors to install cameras in unoccupied homes, and then when people moved in, they would spy on them. And if they saw people doing things like having gay sex or having any kind of gay meetups, they could see what people were doing in private, basically.
Right, the persona or the embodiment of what Trudeau's
the state has no place in the bedrooms of the nation. Yeah, it was the opposite of that. Yeah,
Kadyrov
completely
right in there. Disagrees.
Yeah, he's right in there with you.
Right. One of the things that I find so it's interesting, and it's what makes it so glaring is the dissonance between what we consider, moral and what they consider moral, and also the struggle. I watched this play about a year ago. I'm sorry, I forget the title. It was at Buddies in Bad Times here in Toronto. It was by Nick Green, and the seminal scene in it was this older gay man. He's about 65, having sex with his younger gay boyfriend who's 24, and they were talking, and they were talking about the experience of being gay, and they were having a hard time connecting on that because the older gay guy lived in a time in which he had the starting point of the pride parades in Toronto and in Canada was actually the riots.
Yeah, and in New York,
bathhouses were raided, and in New York,
yeah, the Stonewall riots.
It was real social violence against homosexuals, and anyone who's different in gender or sexuality. And the younger guy, the 24-year-old, is having a hard time connecting with that because he's always lived in a time in which it's more or less been okay to be gay. You know, he's like, yeah, he got picked on in high school a little bit, but as soon as he went to university, it was all fine. He was more or less unscathed from like the classic homophobia of like gay bashing and all that. And so now, anyway, I'm having the same sort of disconnect with these Chechnyan, not lawmakers, I guess, but these Chechnyan folks who are perpetrating this, because it's just such a far distance from like what I consider to be, easy. It's so simple and so clear for me, and yet it's so far away.
Yeah, and I mean, Russian culture right now at large, and Chechen culture even more so, is kind of reveling in a very macho, violent, chauvinistic, kind of a national attitude. Like, there was this big thing about how Russia legalized, was it marital rape, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Russia legalized...
not just marital rape, but like domestic violence.
Yeah, and domestic violence.
So you can hit your
that's right.
partner.
And Russia is doing this deliberately to place itself against the West, who they characterize as being effeminate and gay and weak, right? And they're saying we're the macho, manly, strong ones. And Chechnya has done this to the nth degree, right? Where they're like, Kadyrov, as I think we've said on this podcast in the past, like for his 40th birthday, he made his 3 sons, all of whom are, I think, younger than 12, fight in a televised mixed martial arts match against other kids. Like that's where it's at. It's like, look, my 10-year-old son is punching another 10-year-old kid on TV, and we're the best. Like Chechens have a thorough mixed martial arts training program. This is all part of national pride too, right? It's like you're supposed to fight. You're manly. You're big. You're tough.
Right. It's like a LeVar Ball on steroids. LeVar Ball is like he's like a hardcore NBA dad.
Oh, okay.
His 3 sons are probably going to go to the NBA.
Yeah,
because he's been training
totally
them
like
since
that.
They were little kids.
Yeah, that's what it's like.
But he's like very outspoken and. Anyway, LeVar Ball. Look him up if you're interested. But oh man. So
that's where it's at. I mean, it's profoundly depressing. It's really sad and horrible and terrifying, I'm sure, for these poor gay men who are being beaten and abused, and thankfully some of them are being smuggled out of Chechnya now through a number of different aid organizations, including Rainbow Road, I think in Canada is one of them. But I mean, I think for many people, this is probably, for many gay people across the world, I'm sure this is like the worst nightmare that they could possibly imagine, and one that you probably can't avoid having at some point if you're a gay person anywhere. Like the nightmare of all of society coming against you in a coordinated way to destroy and murder you,
yeah, absolutely. Man, it's very frustrating and hard to look at because as a young idealist like kid, I always sort of thought, oh well, by the time I'm an adult, because me and all my friends agree with this, right? And by the time I'm an adult, surely everyone else will have caught up and come to their senses and it'll all be okay. And yet here I am, 28 years old, like looking at this thing from such a huge distance and being like, God, like before, in my lifetime, we are still going to have like the conversation of this is okay over and over and over and over again,
And I think that's how everything should be. Like values and politics are an active process. And I think that our generation has lost this torch a little bit, or maybe our parents' generation maybe thought these battles were won. Like certainly among mainstream society. But like the more and more I'm coming to see that to have, good social programs, to have fair justice in society for all people, to have labor rights, it actually requires active maintenance. Like the battle's never over. The gains can always be undone. Things can always go backwards. Like it's sort of inconceivable in a way in our mainstream society to think that things could go backwards. Like can you imagine a Canada in which gay marriage is like criminalized again? It's like really hard to conceive of.
Yeah.
But the truth is, things like that can happen. Yeah, things like that can happen, and they'll only not happen if every new successive generation learns to think of it as something that they have a personal responsibility to fight for every day.
Yeah. Well, it's like, it's sort of like the Venezuela thing, which we were talking about. How this country went in one economic crisis, went from being a more or less stable country to a completely wiped out, ineffective economic country.
Right.
And that's just a real thing that happened to 31 million people, or whatever the population of Venezuela is. I don't remember. But,
yeah, that was about right.
Yeah, there's like real... Yeah, the world is real and life is real. And all and things can change for the negative.
Yeah, and the structures of our society have real effects on our lives, and people slowly changing them. Society slowly changes. It sometimes changes for the better. It changes for justice. It changes for equality, and sometimes it changes for inequality. Like we've seen in our economic systems are becoming vastly more unequal than they were when our parents were our age. Right? Like,
it's like I think maybe I've talked about this on the podcast before, but Turkey and Constantinople being like the last bastion of the Roman Empire,
right?
And how if Constantinople hadn't existed, all of Roman culture would have been eradicated, and it was only that, like, by some miracle of defense, they were able to like evacuate all of the relics and artifacts and stuff that somehow ended up in France, that Western society exists at all.
Right.
Like if that had not happened, Western society never would have existed. And we'd be in some other.
There would never have been a Renaissance. There would never have been any of that
stuff.
Nothing.
Yeah. Like England wouldn't exist.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So. Yeah. There are millions of different, infinite realities that can happen, and all of them are possible, and all of them are viable. And it's just exhausting, I guess, is the point.
Yeah, it's tiring.
It is exhausting to constantly, keep your awareness up.
Yeah, of course.
And look at things like this and constantly be asking questions, constantly be trying to be... Also, it's exhausting to always try and be cordial and be, like, polite around those kinds of topics,
I mean, and that's what I'm trying to express here. Like, I understand why Chechnya is the way that it is.
Yeah.
I do not believe it is a just society, and I do not believe... personally that it's a moral society because of the morals that I have.
Yeah.
But I understand that the people there have made a series of choices based on, many of them based on factors that they did not control.
Right.
And it's horrible that this roundup and systematic elimination of gay men is happening.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it's, I guess what I'm trying to say is that like everyone is a human, and I know what you mean about that. It doesn't mean that everything is good. It doesn't mean that you have to like everything and agree with everything, but everyone is a human. In fact, I've been seeing a lot of interesting talk about this. This is a total tangent now, but have you read this article in the Atlantic about the Filipino family that basically kept like a slave in America? Have you seen this article? Okay,
no.
Article blew up this week, and a lot of people are the reactions have been very complicated about it, and a lot of people have talked about how important it is to put into our idea of slave owners that they are humans. They do have close connections and sometimes affection for their slaves, and they feel love sometimes for their slaves. And some people who I think don't understand, some people have been saying how, it's bad that we think of slave owners as having affection for their slaves, and how could people think of it like this? But other people are saying, no, that's the point. The point is slave owners are human. The point is your brain contains a million rationalizations for you still being a good human being, but actually you're a slave owner still, right?
Yeah.
Like just
your realism is different than someone else's.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it's a fascinating point. Yeah. So I guess that's what I was trying to say, and maybe I won't edit out as much of this as I thought I would have, but like I think it is fucking abhorrent that this is happening to gay men in Chechnya, and my heart breaks for them, and for the terror that all of the poor LGBTQ people in my life and across the world have to face at this. At the same time, Chechens have had a fucking hard shake, and I understand why they chose an extremely fundamentalist and form of stability after having nothing but carnage and violence and instability for decades. Like, it sucks. It's a shit situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to jump back to that point and sort of use, maybe this is a bad example. No, I don't think so. Is I was reading a podcast. No, I think I was reading an article that was talking about how it's important not to classify jihadists as crazy.
Right.
It's important for us not to do that, because as soon as you do that, it becomes not you. It becomes not part of yourself.
Right.
It's like blaming magic a little bit. It's like saying it's just something else. It's this unlikely, supernatural, uncontrollable event in this person's brain that is driving them to do this thing. And it's important actually to look at it as, no, they do it because their realism is different than ours. Their consciousness perceives this as a fully moral activity, and like that's the danger. And now that we can, and once you look at that, you can address it. But to say, oh, it's these crazy guys who are walking into supermarkets and blowing themselves up, it's dismissive and it's not helpful.
No, not at all.
And yeah, that's just sort of back on your on the realism point.
Cool. Should we wrap this up?
Let's wrap it up, man. Let's wrap it up. Wow. Okay. Chechnya, incredibly troubled part of the world, is in a bit of a furnace of like stress. Right between the European Union and Russia, has been defending its masculinity and dignity for a long time and hasn't always been successful. And now is doing so under the rule of this Kadyrov fellow, the MMA wonder.
Yeah, right.
who is running it like his own little bro town.
Yeah, pretty much. It is kind of like that.
Yeah.
It's like a bro town.
Yeah.
It's violent and scary, but it's a functional country in a way that it didn't used to be. I guess country, is it its own country? You could really quibble about that. But it's a functional society now in a way that it wasn't before.
Yeah, and if you are not a gay man or a woman, you may enjoy a vacation to terrible. Wow, that is, if you're a woman and you plan on not wearing a headscarf, bring your paintball gun, because the game is good.
Back at them. They'll respect you.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's the situation more or less. I mean, we'll see how it unfolds. I think that it's been a little bit out of the news lately, so
right.
I hope that people who need to get to safety have gotten to safety, and probably it's just pushed a lot more people kind of deeper into the closet or deeper underground and into hiding and stuff like that. So,
one thing I want to ask about, and I'm sorry I'm extending this, I feel like we should, is what is the UN's capacity to stop something like that from happening?
The UN has absolutely no ability to intervene in this case because Russia has a veto on the UN Security Council. So any missions undertaken by the UN Security Council, like in order to intervene in the sovereignty of another state, the UN Security Council has to approve the mission, and Russia has the ability to just be like, nope, which it definitely will not approve on itself.
Right. Wow. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I feel like some dots are connected for you right now.
This a whole bunch of stuff just made a lot more sense.
Yeah, there's like the UN Security Council. I think it has 8 seats. Okay, we're gonna have to double dip this. It has a certain number of seats, and a couple of them are permanent, and a couple of them rotate. Yeah. And like the U.S. and Russia, and I don't know if China does. So there's like several big nations that have permanent vetoes on the UN Security Council for if they get to do stuff or not.
Right.
So the UN can say angry things about it, but they can't do anything without Russia's permission.
Wow. We should do an episode on the UN.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, actually, that's a good idea. You may remember that when Dmitry Medvedev was briefly the president of Russia, he allowed the UN to intervene in Libya, and Putin thought that was horrible. He hated that. Yeah. He couldn't believe that they didn't veto that mission.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I've heard enough about Chechnya.
As have we all. Chechnya, we better never hear any shit from you again. You hear us?
Unless you're planning on being some cool bad guys in a James Bond movie.
Yeah, that's right. Then, hit us with a good YouTube trailer or something. I don't know. Yeah. A good GIF. Whatever it is you guys do now.
Wow. Okay. Well, this has been another episode of Explain It to Jamie. If you've enjoyed it, please share it.
Yeah.
Share it. If nothing else,
just tell your
please,
friends.
God, share it.
Tell your friends.
Yeah, just tell your friends.
It really helps us out the most. Like, more than anything else you could do, just, tell people to give us a listen. Point them in the ways of episodes that you thought were particularly interesting.
Yeah.
It would help us a lot. Rate us on iTunes.
That helps as well.
Yeah.
We love making this podcast, and we would love it if more people would tune in.
Hell yeah. You can also, let us know if we've gotten anything wrong, or if you have any information you'd like to add on Twitter at ExplainJamie. You can tweet at us. You can leave us a comment on SoundCloud.com/ExplainItToJamie. Facebook, Explain It to Jamie is our group.
Or you can email us.
ExplainItToJamie@gmail.com.
Yeah, we're all over the internet, guys. We are so hip and with it.
And we've been starting to get a lot more listener feedback about episodes to do and things like that. We've hit a lot of them.
That's right.
For real, if you have something you want us to cover, we will cover it. We will talk about it. We will say your point on air, and we will credit you for it. So don't be afraid.
Yeah, this can be an exercise for your ego as well as ours.
That's right. We're sharing the wealth here. We're redistributive with our egos.
Until next time, I'm Jamie.
I'm Richard.
This is Explain It to Jamie.
Woo!